The moment my wife's mother slipped something into my drink and raised her glass to toast, family, I knew she was trying to poison me, and I smiled anyway. I didn't flinch. Didn't ask what it was. Didn't even blink. Just clinked her glass like I was too grateful to notice. But I noticed. I saw the slight shimmer as the drop hit the champagne, clear and deliberate, and the way she quickly tucked a tiny dropper back into her clutch like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. But I didn't drink it. I reached for the untouched flute beside mine on the server's tray and swapped it while she turned to wave at a council member across the gallery. No scene. No confrontation. Just a silent promise, I see you. An hour later, someone else was slumped in a folding chair, pale and trembling, barely conscious. A woman from the mayor's office. And from the look on Eleanor's face as she watched medics arrive, I could tell, this wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. Let me back up. My name's Mark Elwood. I'm 38. I live in Portland. And I make documentaries. Nothing flashy, mostly community stories, indie projects, grant-funded festival circuit type of stuff. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. I get to shine a light on things that matter. But to people like Eleanor and William Rensley, my wife's adoptive parents, work only matters if it comes with power, prestige, or at least a donor plaque. To them, I've always been a placeholder. The man Claire married while she was still figuring things out. William once asked if I ever planned to get a real job. Eleanor, for her part, never even asked what I did, not once in the 8 years I've been in their family orbit. Claire and I met back in grad school. She was in urban planning, I was knee-deep in editing a film on public housing displacement. She had a quiet fire about her, sharp, kind, grounded. We built something real. Something outside the bubble of her parents' expectations. And for a while, that was enough. But then came the long dinners. The silent critiques wrapped in compliments. The offers to introduce me to someone more established, more successful, more appropriate. Claire always defended me, gently, with that nervous laugh she only used around them. He's doing important work, Mom, she'd say. He's not chasing corporate money. Eleanor would smile tight. Of course, darling. We all have our hobbies. It got old. But I let it slide. For Claire. The Portland Canvas Gala was Eleanor's crown jewel. A black tie night at the downtown gallery, plastered with velvet ropes and expensive wine, where donors clapped for causes and whispered about each other's wardrobes. This year, Claire said it was important we go. They've been trying, she said. They even asked if you'd help document the event. Isn't that a good sign? I wanted to say no. I wanted to stay home, edit my project, cook pasta, and watch movies on the couch. But I looked at her, the way she still held hope that they could change, and I said, sure. Let's go. I brought my camera, dressed the part. The gallery buzzed with the kind of energy that only comes when wealth pretends to be generous. I kept to the edges, filming quietly, sipping my drink, the real one, and keeping a close eye on Eleanor. That's when she approached me, 2 flutes in hand, her smile polished to a diamond edge. To family, she said. And to the in-laws who keep things interesting. She handed me the glass. I accepted it, smiled like a fool, and let the bubbles rise while she watched. But I never drank it. I let her turn her head, then switched glasses. Clean and easy. A habit I'd picked up after years of documenting corruption in less polished circles. The gallery lights glittered on white wine and bronze sculptures. Then, maybe 45 minutes later, a commotion. One of the guests had collapsed near the exhibits. A woman in her mid-30s. Pale, disoriented, confused. Paramedics came fast. The whispering came faster. From across the room, I caught Eleanor's face. For a brief moment, her mask cracked. Not panic, calculation. Who drank what? Who saw what? Did anyone notice? I did. Claire noticed something was wrong, too. That's Denise Whitman, she whispered. She works with the mayor's team. Her voice trembled slightly. I could see it in her eyes, the worry. Not just for Denise, but for something bigger. Something she couldn't quite name. I squeezed her hand. I'm sure she'll be okay, I said quietly. I didn't know that for sure. But I needed Claire calm. When we got home that night, Claire kissed me on the cheek and went upstairs. She was tired. It had been a long evening of polite smiling and networking. I said I had to offload footage. I didn't. I sat in my tiny studio, shut the door, and pulled up the footage I'd recorded during the gala. My hands weren't shaking, not exactly. But they weren't still either. I found the clip. Zoomed in. There it was, clear as glass. Eleanor, slipping something from a dropper into my flute. Her expression didn't change. Her hand barely moved. But it was there. Time-stamped. In high definition. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. I should have felt angry. I should have been yelling, punching walls. But I didn't. I felt cold. Like the part of me that always made excuses for her had finally gone quiet. That's when it hit me, this wasn't new. The signs had been there. Claire's grant application getting dropped after a casual lunch with her parents. The nonprofit I'd volunteered to film for getting blackballed from city funding. A journalist friend of mine who abruptly cut contact after interviewing William. At the time, it all felt like bad timing. Now, it felt like a strategy. They didn't just disapprove of people. They erased them. The next day, I called in a favor. An old friend from a project on environmental poisoning owed me one. I handed off the champagne glass, the one with the scratch on the base, and said I needed a full breakdown. No questions. Then I started digging. Phone records, board appointments, internal documents, the kind you can find if you know which nonprofits are technically public record. I wasn't hunting for revenge. Not yet. I just wanted to understand what I was dealing with. A few days later, I got the lab report. Traces of scopolamine. A small dose. Enough to fog the brain. Enough to cause a scene. That night, I sat alone in our kitchen long after Claire had gone to bed. The window was open. The wind outside carried that faint Portland drizzle smell. I stared at the report, then at my reflection in the microwave door. I didn't look angry. I looked tired. I thought about everything I'd let slide over the years. The jabs. The backhanded remarks. The way they treated Claire like she was on loan to someone beneath them. And I wondered if that was my mistake, letting it slide. Pretending silence was strength. I used to think that, too. Claire came down the stairs at one point, rubbing her eyes. Still working? Yeah, I said, closing the folder. She kissed my head. They're not all bad, you know. I smiled. Of course not. But that smile didn't reach me either. Later, when I finally lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind wasn't spinning, it was steady. Focused. I wasn't plotting. Not exactly. I was waiting. And they had just sent the next invitation. The gala for the new arts annex. Another night. Another stage. Same guests. Same cameras. And once again, Eleanor and William would stand under the lights, pretending to be pillars of this city. I traced my finger along the edge of the invitation and thought. They wanted a show. Fine. Let's give them one. I didn't show up to the advisory meeting for the gallery's new wing. The same meeting I used to help run, the one Claire's parents had always said I should be grateful to be included in. I didn't email to cancel. Didn't explain. Just didn't show. But I watched it anyway. Not in person. From my laptop. I'd built a small, private server months ago as part of a project I never submitted, a series on public meeting transparency. Most city building committees don't even know they're live streaming through outdated, unsecured platforms. But I did. I watched as Eleanor sat at the head of the panel in a fresh pearl gray suit, smiling like she owned the air. Which, in that room, she probably did. A new mural was being approved, a symbol of community vision, Eleanor said. What she didn't mention was the original artist, someone I'd mentored, had their design replaced 2 weeks ago after declining to appear at a private donor event. They'd told me, privately, nervously, that they'd been uninvited after that. The mural Eleanor unveiled wasn't just new. It was signed by an artist she'd been publicly boosting on social media, one who, coincidentally, had ties to Williams' real estate firm. It wasn't just art. It was a signature. Her power, stamped onto a public wall. And me? I was nowhere in the picture. That's how I wanted it. I deleted every one of my public profiles over the next 24 hours. Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, even the neglected Vimeo account where I'd hosted my early short films. I archived everything before I took it down. Stored it cleanly on a drive labeled Archive, Elwood. Let them think I vanished. Claire noticed. Did something happen? She asked gently, folding laundry on the bed. No, I said. I think I'm just done trying to prove anything. She paused. To them? To anyone. She smiled a little, not happy, just relieved. Like she didn't have to pretend anymore either. I stopped going to filmmaker meetups. Stopped pitching my latest doc. I stopped letting people expect me. Instead, I started collecting. Public records. Grant reversals. Donation timelines. I built a spreadsheet, buried behind layers of dummy folders, cross-referencing nonprofit donations with committee appointments and quiet firings. There were patterns, hidden in clean formatting and well-crafted press releases. Meanwhile, the Rensleys were soaring. Eleanor had just accepted a new honorary title, Cultural Advancement Liaison for Greater Portland. A made-up role, but one with access, and public funds. William, ever the quiet operator, had finalized a deal with the city's downtown revitalization project. Guess whose land value spiked because of the rezoning? They weren't just maintaining control. They were expanding it. Claire showed me the article on her phone during breakfast. Did you see this? She asked. My dad's firm just closed the riverfront grant bid. It's everywhere. I glanced at it. Congratulations to them. She watched me closely. You're really not bothered? I reached for my coffee. No. I'm just learning to accept things as they are. She didn't say anything. But that night, I found her at the kitchen table, scrolling through news archives. I glanced over her shoulder. The headline read, Mysterious Collapse at Canvas Gala Raises Eyebrows. She closed the tab when she noticed me. Didn't mention it again. Letting go, that was the narrative I gave everyone. I let my inbox pile up. Told a friend I was taking a break from filmmaking. Left messages on read. It felt like retreat. But I was moving, just underground. At night, while Claire slept, I sifted through flagged transactions tied to the arts initiative. Some of them didn't match reported values. I reached out to a friend, a forensic accountant I'd once interviewed for a project on arts funding mismanagement. I didn't tell her the full story. Just enough to get her curious. 2 days later, she sent a short text, "You're not paranoid." That same week, I saw William in the Pearl District. Claire and I were walking through the park with coffees when he stepped out of a gallery entrance with an assistant at his side. His eyes landed on us, no warning. His smile kicked in half a second too late. "Mark," he said, extending a hand. I shook it. Briefly. "You've been quiet lately," he added. I've been listening. He blinked at that. Hope all's well. I smiled. Some things fix themselves. Others need help. The assistant glanced awkwardly between us. William's hand twitched. He nodded, offered Claire a hug, and left. But his posture was different when he walked away. More rigid. He didn't look back. Claire gave me a look as we continued walking. What was that? What do you mean? You didn't used to talk to him like that. I didn't used to know what I know now. She stopped walking. Her brow furrowed. Mark, if something's going on, just tell me. I'm not on their side. I didn't answer right away. I know, I said quietly. But you've also never had to choose. That night, I found her in the hallway, staring at the Gala photo still framed on our bookshelf, the one with all of us smiling under the chandelier. Eleanor in the middle. Claire next to her. Me on the edge, just slightly out of focus. The next morning, Claire was gone before I woke up. Just a note on the counter, went to see Mom. Be back later. She never said, Mom. Always, Eleanor. That night, when she got home, she looked drained. They want us to join them at the Annex fundraiser next week, she said, pouring a glass of wine. Do you? She took a long sip before answering. I don't know what I want anymore. The middle of that week brought something new. Eleanor published a public essay on the gallery's blog. The Canvas of Trust, it was called. A glowing manifesto about transparency, community leadership, and lifting up new voices. I read it twice. Buried in the middle was a veiled reference to those who choose obscurity over accountability. Claire never mentioned the article. But I saw her reading it at the kitchen table, biting her thumbnail, scrolling up and down. Then she shut her laptop and sat very still. She was unraveling, slowly. Caught between the family she came from and the life we'd built. I didn't blame her. But I also wasn't waiting for her to pick sides. That's the thing about quiet, it can be compliance, or it can be strategy. They assumed I was disappearing. They didn't realize I was documenting everything. The photographer from the gala? I tracked him down and paid for a private batch of unused photos. One of them caught Eleanor in that exact moment, holding the dropper, her fingers still curled around the stem of my glass. The resolution wasn't perfect, but it was real. The woman who collapsed that night, Denise, hadn't spoken publicly. But her assistant responded to my email. All I asked for was a timeline. Where she was. What she drank. How she felt. The assistant sent me a spreadsheet. I matched it to the footage. Everything lined up. By Friday, I had the start of a visual timeline, not a film, not yet, but a sequence of images and records and faces. Eleanor's network wasn't just about influence. It was about silencing. Redirecting. Smiling while slicing. That night, while Claire was brushing her teeth, I sat at my desk and opened a new file. I didn't name it Final Cut this time. That felt too polished. Too cinematic. This one was titled The Canvas, Unframed. I uploaded the first photo, Eleanor with the dropper. Then the city report on the gala incident. Then the donor map showing matching contributions and board appointments. Then the screenshot of her essay. Then the photo of me, standing at the edge of their frame, slightly out of focus. I didn't add music. I didn't narrate. I let the pieces speak. But I added one title card at the end. Just a single line. See what power looks like, before it sees you. When Claire came out of the bathroom, she paused by my shoulder. What's that? Just notes, I said. She rested a hand lightly on my back. You're different, she said quietly. I know. She hesitated. I don't want to lose you, she said. I turned in my chair, met her eyes. Then don't stand next to people who already decided I'm disposable. She didn't respond. She just walked away slowly, her wine glass still full. When the door clicked shut behind her, I turned back to the screen. And hit save. A week before the Annex Gala, Eleanor gave a speech that aired on local TV. She stood beneath the soft glow of track lights at the Portland Modern and spoke about legacy and light, her words. William stood just off stage, nodding, smiling, masterfully silent. Claire and I watched it from our couch. She didn't say a word. Just stared at the screen like she was trying to make sense of a dream that no longer held up in the light. I studied Eleanor's phrasing. The way she said, "our city's vision." The way her smile never once touched her eyes. She was so sure she was untouchable. And that was her blind spot. The next day, I went out to film exterior B-roll of the gallery annex. Not for beauty, for record. I shot tight frames, name plaques, donor bricks, the new sculpture garden. The same art Eleanor once called public assets. Framed and repurposed like trophies. As I filmed, a maintenance worker stepped outside for a smoke. He nodded at me. "You press?" he asked. I hesitated. "Sort of." He shrugged. "You guys have been around a lot lately." I paused. "A lot?" "Yeah. Lady with the scarf and that blonde guy, they've been walking the grounds with some suit types. Planning something." I smiled politely and moved on. But the words stuck with me. Back home, I updated the project file I'd titled The Canvas, Unframed. The footage went into a new sequence. I scrubbed through audio logs and flagged anything new. But something felt off. I opened one of the encrypted drives I'd received weeks earlier, the one from Denise's assistant. There was a second file I hadn't noticed. Corrupted metadata, hidden behind a nested folder. I ran recovery. Inside was an audio recording, quiet, grainy, but real. Eleanor's voice again. "You have to understand," she was saying. "People forget what's said in passing. But impressions can last forever." The tone made my skin crawl. That same night, I received an email from a city agency. A formal notice: my nonprofit's 2023 tax exemption had been flagged for reassessment. The reasons were vague, tied to incomplete public records. The timing? Too clean. I called Layla. She picked up on the second ring. "I just heard," she said. "That came down fast." "You think it's them?" "I don't think, Mark. I know. The guy who signed it used to be a junior donor advisor for Williams' firm." I recognized the name immediately. "So this is them hitting back?" "Absolutely. Quietly. Paper cuts with real bleed." There was a pause. Then she added, "You know she got me blacklisted from the Chronicle, right?" That stopped me. "What?" "Eleanor. Years ago. I pitched a piece about housing vouchers tied to city development grants. Next thing I know, my editor says the funding's too politically sensitive. A week later, I'm reassigned. By the end of the month, I'm out." I leaned back in my chair. "So why help me?" "I don't like silence," she said. Claire found the folder 2 nights later. It was bound in a slim black binder, half hidden under papers on my desk. Not labeled. Not locked. I hadn't meant for her to see it yet, not like this. She sat on the edge of our bed, flipping through photos, transcripts, stills. The still frame of Eleanor at the gala. The forensic report on the sedative. The pixelated email thread about board reassignments. When I walked in, she didn't look up right away. "Is this everything?" she asked finally. "No," I said honestly. "But it's enough." She held up a printout. Eleanor's quote, "People forget what's said in passing." Claire's voice cracked. I remember her saying this. I thought it was poetic. I knelt beside her. I didn't want to pull you into this. You didn't pull me, she whispered. She pushed me. She lowered the folder to her lap and looked at me. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to let them show who they are. She stared at me, torn wide open. I want to believe everything in here. But if I believe it, then I have to hate them. You don't have to hate them, I said. Just stop protecting them. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, you're planning to show this, aren't you? Yes. At the gala? I met her eyes. That's where the mask is thickest. So yeah, that's where it comes off. Claire's face shifted, not angry, not afraid. Just raw. Like something old had cracked wide open inside her. She set the binder down. I need to think. She left the room. I didn't follow. 2 days before the gala, I almost got caught. I was reviewing a secure cloud link on my laptop, footage from a city grant board meeting where Eleanor just happened to endorse a developer with links to William's firm. Nothing unusual, until I heard the chime of my screen being mirrored to the living room TV. Claire had turned it on, not realizing. Suddenly, Eleanor's voice echoed across the room. This is a critical moment for equitable access. Claire stood frozen in the doorway. I scrambled to disconnect the screen, heart pounding. She looked at me, not angry, just stunned. I wasn't spying, I said quickly. I was documenting. She nodded once. Then turned and walked out. I didn't see her again until the next morning. When I woke up, she was already dressed, blazer, clean lines, simple makeup. She handed me a flash drive. What's this? She met my eyes. My choice. I opened it. A video, 15 seconds, but unmistakable. Claire at a board meeting 3 years ago, interrupting Eleanor mid-speech. I remembered that day. She had questioned a rushed vote. The clip had been buried. You filmed this? I asked. She nodded. And I saved it. Even then. For a long time, neither of us said anything. The day before the gala, Eleanor held a press conference at the gallery's sculpture garden. Local news. Champagne. Light applause. She wore white, like always. Said it symbolized transparency. I watched the stream on my laptop, my fingers quietly syncing the final timeline. 12 minutes, 47 seconds. That's how long the video was now. No narrator. Just Eleanor. In her own words. Her own actions. Spliced with the fallout. Claire had added a final note at the end, a quote from her own journal, dated 2 months ago. Silence is not loyalty. It's surrender. That quote came up over a photo of Claire as a teenager, standing next to Eleanor in a press clipping. It was perfect. I backed up the final cut on 3 separate drives. One went to Layla. One to the gallery technician, a former student of mine, who now handled all internal projection for the event. And the last? That one stayed with me. The morning of the gala, I opened my closet and stared for a long time. Not about what to wear. About whether to go. Because here's the truth no one tells you about revenge, even when you're right, even when it's deserved, it's still terrifying. I was shaking when I buttoned my collar. Claire stood behind me in the mirror. She reached around and straightened my tie. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. I do. She nodded once. Then I'll be there. Not for them. For you. We left together. But we walked in separately. I kept my flash drive tucked in a black envelope, slipped inside the inner lining of my jacket. It wasn't dramatic, just smart. At the door, William greeted guests with that neutral, practiced charm. When he saw me, his smile twitched for a split second. Then returned. "Glad you could join us," he said. I smiled back. I wouldn't miss it. Inside, the gallery glowed. Soft lighting. Jazz quartet. Wine glasses like glass sculptures. Projectors ready for the donor tribute at 7 p.m. I looked up at the screen. 12 minutes. 47 seconds. That's all it would take. Eleanor raised her glass high, perfectly framed under the gallery skylight. To art, she declared. To legacy, and to the family who inspires us. Polite applause. The cameras flashed. The jazz trio softened. It was her moment. And my stomach felt like a fist. My palms were damp. I hadn't blinked since she began speaking. 1 hour in. Right on cue. The big screen flickered. At first it looked like part of the program, a montage of last year's gala. Elegant shots of the chandelier, the speeches, the donors. Eleanor's smile warmed, she thought it was her highlight reel. Then the music cut. And the close-up appeared, Eleanor's own hands, mid-laugh, slipping a clear dropper into a glass. The same glass she'd handed to me. I felt my chest tighten. For a split second, I wondered if the file would glitch, if someone would pull the plug. My throat was dry. A murmur ran through the crowd. "What's this?" someone whispered. Eleanor stiffened. "Stop this," she called out sharply, turning toward the tech booth. "This is not part of the program." William stepped forward, voice booming, "This is defamation. Shut it down immediately." But the technician, a former student of mine, kept his hands folded. He looked calm. Prepared. And the video rolled on. No narration. No commentary. Just facts. Denise's voice played softly over footage of the gala. I remember feeling dizzy, confused. They told me to rest. I never saw my drink again. The lab report filled the screen next, a clean white page, the word scopolamine underlined. Then a recording, grainy but clear, Eleanor's voice saying. "People forget what's said in passing. But impressions can last forever." Someone near the front gasped. Another person began filming on their phone. Eleanor's composure cracked. She turned back to the crowd, lifting her chin. "This is manipulation," she said loudly. "Fabricated. A malicious attack." But then came the timeline. Names. Dates. Donations. Board removals. All lined up. Patterns visible even to the casual eye. And then, unexpectedly, Claire's voice. "Silence is not loyalty. It's surrender." The line appeared over a photo of her as a teenager beside Eleanor, smiling with uncertainty. That's when Eleanor froze. Just for a heartbeat. William tried one last time. "These are coincidences," he barked. "Half-truths. We'll sue every outlet in this city if they publish." But Layla's live feed popped up on the second screen, her voice measured and calm. "The footage you're seeing tonight has been independently verified by multiple sources. Documents have been reviewed. Audio has been authenticated. These are not accusations. They are patterns." Phones rose in unison. The sound of shutters. Texting. Recording. The power dynamic flipped in a single, silent breath. I stood near the back, watching. My pulse thudded in my ears. For months I'd imagined this moment as clean, righteous, cathartic. But in reality? It felt messy. Shaky. Like standing on the edge of a cliff you've been climbing for too long. I wasn't smiling. I was barely breathing. Across the room, Claire stepped forward, eyes fixed on Eleanor. "I didn't want to see it," she said, her voice low but clear enough for those nearby to hear. "I should have seen it sooner." Eleanor turned to her. "Claire, darling, you know me." "No," Claire said, firmer. I don't. A ripple moved through the crowd. That, more than the video, seemed to unnerve Eleanor. Her daughter stepping out of the frame. Claire moved back to stand beside me. She didn't take my hand. She didn't need to. The video ended with a quiet title card. Power paints its own portrait. Until you show the brush. Silence. Then, almost comically, the sound of the jazz trio starting up again before faltering. No one applauded. Someone from the Chronicle walked out quickly, phone to ear. Another guest whispered, "They're finished." Eleanor's face was pale. William's jaw flexed. They weren't toppled yet, but the ground beneath them was cracking. The aftermath started before the night even ended. A city council member stepped away from Eleanor's side. The gallery's director announced an immediate review of donor practices on Twitter before dessert was served. By morning, 2 major donors had suspended their pledges. By midweek, the board had voted to suspend Eleanor's honorary positions. William's firm lost a key contract. And the City Ethics Committee issued a brief statement: "We are reviewing recent footage related to potential misuse of influence and will investigate fully." It wasn't a criminal charge. Not yet. But it was the first time in decades anyone had dared to put their names and investigate in the same sentence. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. When the Chronicle's headline ran, "A Portrait in Control, How Power Quietly Shapes Culture," my name wasn't in it. Not directly. But the story stood. The evidence stood. I went for a walk that night. Past the gallery. Past the donor plaque that had already been taken down. In its place was a temporary sign, "Under Review." I stopped and looked at it. The drizzle slicked the sidewalk. My reflection shimmered on the wet stone. I thought about the years of shrinking myself to fit into their frame. The quiet humiliations. The glass of champagne I didn't drink. I thought about how easily I could have taken the poison and gone home, never knowing how deep it ran. And then I thought, now they know I'm not disposable. Claire joined me on the walk. She slipped her arm through mine. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I should have believed you sooner." I shook my head. "You didn't want to believe it. I get that." We stopped outside the gallery doors. She looked at me. "What happens now?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But at least now, everyone sees them as they are." She nodded. "And you?" I took a breath. "I think I finally get to work again. Without them in the shadows." A week later, a small arts foundation called. They asked if I'd consider advising on rebuilding trust. I said I'd think about it. Because rebuilding isn't instant. Exposure isn't everything. But it's a start. And as for Eleanor and William? They're still wealthy. Still connected. But when they walk into a room now, people stop whispering about them and start whispering to each other. Their glow is gone. And that's what they valued most. The night I finished uploading my footage to a public archive, I sat alone in my studio. No music. No wine. Just the hum of my hard drive. I thought about everything. About how revenge isn't clean. About how telling the truth still shakes your hands. And then I closed the laptop. Not smiling. Just breathing. Because the story wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd been erased. Final line. They wanted silence. What they got was a story no one could ignore.